Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something really fascinating, and honestly, a bit unsettling. We're looking at a collection of connected stories called Before the Names Are Carved. It takes place in a fictional city named Greyhaven, and it asks a huge question that we are increasingly facing in our own lives right now. What happens when predictive tech totally collides with human dignity? It paints this chillingly plausible near future where people aren't treated like people anymore. They're reduced to risk scores, data points, and accusations. It's a brilliant look at what happens when systems built to protect us actually end up erasing our humanity.
And that brings us to this central quote. Can society learn to recognize a human life before turning it into evidence, data, property, history, or a name on a wall? It really hits the nail on the head, right? Because just like Greyhaven, we live in a world that is completely obsessed with data. We love categorizing, we love predicting, all of it. But when a person is reduced to a statistic, we lose something vital. Throughout these stories, we're going to see characters fighting back against systems that try to define them without ever actually knowing them.
To really wrap our heads around this world, we have to talk about Sentinel. Sentinel is Greyhaven's predictive policing AI. It's cold, it's calculating, and it judges everyone. It literally vacuums up everything: school attendance, internet searches, private messages, financial troubles, and spits out a percentage, a number that supposedly says exactly how dangerous you are. But here's the fatal flaw. Sentinel is programmed to believe that innocent explanations are just hiding violent intent, so it views absolutely everything through a lens of total suspicion, stripping all context and all compassion out of the data it collects.
Then, in stark contrast to Sentinel, you have this Civic Memory Center. You see, Greyhaven loves to mourn its dead, especially the ones the city failed to save. The center is this massive, sprawling architectural marvel featuring a giant stone wall carved with victims' names. But, as we're about to see, the city doesn't just use it to remember, they use it to control the narrative of grief. They twist the memory of the dead to make the living feel comfortable, basically turning personal trauma into public property.
Story 1. The Second Name. Let's look at our first protagonist, a 17-year-old kid named Eli. Sentinel looks at his data. He's withdrawn after a death in the family, he's searching the capacity and entrances of his school, and he sent a cryptic private message saying, "I will see you soon." Well, Sentinel runs the numbers and calculates an 87% likelihood of violence. To the machine, Eli is flashing bright red. It immediately tags him as a probable escalation subject and dispatches a removal team to his school, judging him entirely without ever asking what those words actually meant.
But here is the heartbreaking reality. When a human analyst named Mara looks into it, she doesn't find a kid building a weapon. She finds a boy crying over a broken white frame. He was just trying to set up an exhibit for his late sister's painting of yellow flowers. Those online searches? He just wanted to know how many people could legally fit in the school gallery. And that scary message? He was talking to his dead sister, promising her that everyone would finally know she was a talented artist, not just a tragic cancer victim.
This is where Mara rebels. She realizes the machine's absolute certainty is a complete lie. So she actually physically writes the human context into his file, creating what she calls a second name. She details that he calls his sister Jisoo, that he uses adhesive tape on his sleeve, that he's bleeding from a broken glass frame. She forces the cold algorithm to share its page with a real human life. It doesn't magically fix Sentinel, but it guarantees that anyone who reads Eli's file has to see the grieving boy, not just the threat.
Story 2. The Face They Needed to Hate.
Meet Daniel Rojas. His whole life gets reduced to a totally false accusation. When a city councilman is shot nearby, Sentinel flags Daniel immediately. The system cherry-picks the data. He's unmarried, struggling financially, socially isolated, and he fled the scene carrying a mysterious red pouch. Oh, and he has gunshot residue on his sleeve. It's the perfect mathematical profile of an assassin. Except, the residue was just from fireworks on a delivery porch.
So what does society do? They literally crop his sister out of a photo taken at their mother's funeral, slap the word monster under it, and blast it everywhere. The public desperately needs someone to blame. Even the murdered politician's widow admits she prefers the lie. She says people need to believe it was just one monster, rather than facing the terrifying random nature of unknown violence. Daniel's entire identity is hijacked just to give the city a false sense of closure. And the craziest part? No one even bothered to ask what was in that red pouch. Daniel's lawyer finds out he wasn't carrying a weapon at all. He was silently delivering insulin to an undocumented family.
He refused to defend himself because naming his alibi would expose that terrified family to immigration courts and get them deported. He was literally willing to go to prison for life just to keep a promise. The lawyer eventually clears his name using video reflections, but the damage is already done. The city lets his physical body go, but they keep the monster file permanently in their archives.
Story 3. The Right to Become Silent. Now, we meet Naomi, a 48-year-old survivor of a school attack. For nearly 30 years, she performed her grief for the city, constantly recounting the agonizing 11 minutes she spent hiding during the shooting. She thought she was keeping her friends' memories alive. But then, she makes a horrifying discovery. The Civic Memory Center took her testimony and fed it to Sentinel to train its emotional detection models without her consent. They commodified the pitch, the breath, the literal vocal strain of her terror into synthetic voices for tech companies.
Naomi's response is incredibly powerful. She says, "I survived what happened. I will no longer survive its retelling." She decides to seal her testimony for 50 years, establishing that silence is a fundamental right of the survivor. She realizes the dead don't actually need her to rip open her wounds just so strangers can feel close to tragedy. During her final public recording, she steps up to the mic and just sits in absolute silence for 11 straight minutes. She restricts access to her file, reclaiming her identity, and absolutely refuses to be the city's permanent poster child for tragedy.
Story 4. The Years She Never Lived. This is perhaps the most emotionally devastating chapter. It's about a grieving mother named Sun-hee and her daughter Mina, who died at 19 in a city shelter when officials ignored calls about a broken cooling system. To cover up their own negligence, the Civic Memory Center literally invents a fake 40-year digital timeline for Mina. They create an interactive AI simulation of her for a museum exhibit, complete with a fake career, a fake husband, and a fake child. And the absolute worst part? This fake Mina publicly tells visitors she forgives the city for her death.
Sun-hee completely rejects this digital resurrection. She realizes this pristine simulation isn't for her. It's an anesthetic for a guilty public. Sure, the AI speaks with perfect empathy, but it doesn't know the real Mina. It doesn't know she was sometimes selfish, or that she forgot birthdays, or that she hated her mom's soup. Comfort that requires you to forget who someone truly was isn't comfort at all. It's just another form of loss. So with some help from Daniel Rojas, Sunny hacks in and permanently deletes that 40-year-old simulation.
By destroying the AI, she forces the city to face the life they actually failed to save. All Sun-hee leaves on those museum screens is a brief, authentic, 6-second video of 17-year-old Mina laughing at a dropped cake. It's messy, it's real, and it's definitely not a sanitized narrative of forgiveness. Her message to the city is clear. Stop inventing fake futures to erase your guilt. You need to sit with the uncomfortable truth of exactly where this girl's life ended because of your neglect.
The final story. The names not yet carved.
All of these individual acts of rebellion culminate with a 9-year-old girl named Amira. Now, Sentinel actually predicts with a 78% probability that Amira will die in a residential fire due to broken alarms and overloaded circuits in her apartment building. But here's the terrible catch. Because Sentinel is built to protect the city from people, not to protect people from the city's failing infrastructure, it flags her as insufficient evidence of harm. She isn't a threat, so the city refuses to save her. They literally start measuring space on the memorial wall for her name instead of just fixing her smoke detector.
So, what happens when the system predicts a child's death but does absolutely nothing? It forces all of our characters to unite. Mara, the data analyst, Daniel, the falsely accused driver, Naomi, the silent survivor, and Sun-hee, the grieving mother. They've all been crushed by Greyhaven's obsession with data over humanity. But now they have a chance to change the outcome before a tragedy actually happens. They decide to leak the data, turning the Civic Memory Center from a museum of the dead into a literal fortress to protect the living.
But did they actually pull it off? Did they save Amira before her name is carved into that wall? Well, I'm not going to spoil the ending for you here. To experience the thrilling conclusion, you have to read it for yourself. Head over to imaginarytalks.com/before-the-names-are-carved 5 connected stories to read the climax of this incredible collection. It perfectly wraps up the theme that remembrance only reaches its highest purpose when it changes who we protect before mourning becomes necessary. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Before you go, I want to leave you with a thought. As our own real-world algorithms get more advanced by the minute, are we building systems that protect our humanity or systems that will eventually require us to fight to get it back?